Man, listen, the internet has been upside down since sunrise, and nobody can figure out whether this is a glitch in the Matrix or the biggest plot twist in hip-hop drama history. Because out of nowhere, and I mean nowhere, rumors started flying that Lil Durk just walked straight into what fans are calling the Wiretap nightmare. And the way this thing leaked, people swear it felt like watching a deleted scene from Power that somehow slipped into real life. But here's where the whole story goes from crazy to downright unbelievable. King Von's name, yes, King Von, suddenly got pulled back into the conversation, like a ghost from a case everyone thought was sealed, archived, and collecting dust somewhere. Then out of thin air, boom, the internet explodes with whisperings of some mysterious audio that allegedly sent the courtroom into dead silence. One, eyewitnesses, and you know how the streets talk, and claimed that when the judge heard the words wire communication, the whole room froze up. Reporters looked at each other, lawyers stopped flipping through papers. Even Durk sat back in his chair like somebody had just pressed rewind on the past. Fans are shocked. The comments are a war zone. Some are yelling set up, others say betrayal, and a whole different crowd is convinced this is all part of a bigger chess game only Durk understands. Meanwhile, Von's supporters are locked in, demanding answers, refusing to blink until every detail drops. Whatever this is, it's not normal news. It's a storm, when we're only at the first thunderclap. The moment the courthouse doors swung open that morning, it felt like everybody inside walked straight into a storm they didn't see coming. People weren't whispering. Nah, they were buzzing, vibrating with nervous energy, like the air itself had secrets trapped in it. Security guards were already irritated, cameras were flashing before anything even happened, and bloggers were staking out their spots like hunters waiting on a perfect shot. It was supposed to be a routine hearing, the kind nobody even pays attention to anymore. But the atmosphere said otherwise. Every eye kept shifting toward the entrance, waiting for the one person everybody knew would turn this into a spectacle: Lil Durk. When he finally stepped inside, you could literally feel the ripple spread through the hallway. He wasn't wild or animated. Durk was too seasoned for that. Instead, he walked in calm, controlled, almost too collected, like he had already rehearsed how to carry this weight. But even from a distance, people swear they saw something in his expression. Something subtle, like he was mentally bracing for an impact he knew nobody else was ready for. A couple of fans standing across the street started chanting his name. But the energy was off. It wasn't hype, it was worry. The kind of worry you feel when you know your favorite artist is stepping into something way bigger than music. Inside the courtroom, tension was sitting in every chair, leaning on every wall. Journalists shuffled their notes even before the session began, pretending to look prepared but clearly anticipating something explosive. The lawyers on both sides whispered to each other with hushed urgency, on flipping through documents that suddenly seemed heavier than usual. And then, without warning, something shifted. A clerk rushed in carrying a sealed envelope, the kind that immediately makes everybody in the room straighten their posture. It was handed over to the judge, who took one look at it and paused, her face tightening just a fraction, barely visible, yet unmistakable to anyone paying close attention. That was the moment everything changed. The judge cleared her throat, Ino adjusted her glasses, and calmly announced that new material had been submitted for review. When she said the words, audio communication, the courtroom dropped into an unnatural silence. Some folks leaned forward, others clenched their phones, and a few reporters' eyes went wide enough to fill entire headlines. Durk didn't flinch, but he also didn't blink. His attorney shot him a quick glance, the kind that silently asks, "Did you know about this?" Durk's expression didn't move, but something behind his eyes did, just for a split second, and then it happened. The twist nobody expected, the twist that would send the entire internet spiraling within minutes. The judge mentioned a name connected to the submitted audio, a name that hadn't been spoken in that courtroom in years. King Von gasps echoed across the room like a chain reaction. Even people who swore they weren't emotionally invested sat up straight as if they had misheard. One of the reporters dropped their pen. Although another mouthed, "No way," and two cousins sitting near the back started arguing instantly, one saying it was impossible, the other insisting this was exactly the kind of twist the system loves, dropping at the worst time. Von's name carried weight even after all this time, and hearing it suddenly resurrected in a legal setting was enough to make hearts pound and minds race. Durk finally shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. Not anger, not fear, something deeper, something personal. It was because the connection between him and Vaughn was legendary. Brotherhood, loyalty, shared struggle, shared rise. Hearing that name invoked a whole history, a whole world of memories, triumphs, and pain that never really faded. You could almost see the thoughts running through his head. Why bring this up now? Who submitted this? What did they think they were doing? The prosecution team acted like they were expecting the reaction, and that made everything even more suspicious. They exchanged glances with the kind of smug confidence that instantly set the room on edge. Meanwhile, Durk's attorney demanded to know the source, the purpose, and the relevance of this sudden audio material, but the judge held up her hand, silencing everyone. She insisted they would not speculate until the contents were formally reviewed, but the damage was already done. The tension had skyrocketed in seconds. Outside the courthouse, word traveled almost instantly. Fans started tweeting, us posting, live streaming reactions before they even knew what the audio supposedly contained. Some insisted it had to be a misunderstanding or a desperate reach by someone trying to attach old names to new narratives. Others believed it was a hidden piece of history finally coming to light. And then there were those who felt this was a setup. Too sudden, too convenient, too perfectly timed to be coincidence. Inside, things got even more dramatic. A heated back and forth erupted between both legal teams, each side accusing the other of strategic ambush tactics. Voices raised, hands slammed on desks, tension turned into sparks. Even the judge had to bang her gavel twice to restore order. The courtroom had never seen this type of chaos. Not for years, not for any celebrity hearing, not for any case remotely connected to this universe of characters. Durk stayed calm, but the narrative was shifting all around him like quicksand. People whispered about betrayal. Others speculated about old conversations resurfacing. Some swore this was an inside job. And every time the name Vaughn floated through the air, the entire room felt the emotional shockwave. It wasn't just a case twist, it was a heart twist. The wildest part, none of the details were even released yet. Just the hint of an audio file involving both names was enough to send shockwaves through the entire building. And the unanswered question hanging over everyone's head was the same. What exactly is on that recording? Because whatever it is, it's big enough to shake a courtroom, and loud enough to shake the internet before a single second of it has even been heard. The moment the judge announced a recess to privately review the mysterious audio file, the courtroom exploded into a swarm of noise the second her gavel hit the wood. People rushed toward the aisles, reporters scrambled to call their editors, and even some of the attorneys stormed out like they needed fresh air just to process whatever storm was forming. Durk remained seated for a few seconds longer, staring calmly ahead, but that calm was deceptive. Anyone who really knew him, even in this, could sense the pressure building behind his steady expression. He finally stood up, brushed his hands against his jeans, and leaned over to whisper something to his lawyer. Whatever he said made the attorney's eyes widen slightly before he nodded and hurried toward the hallway. Outside, it was even more chaotic. The second the recess began, the crowd of fans and bloggers camping outside the courthouse surged forward like they were trying to break through an invisible barrier. Everybody wanted answers. Any sliver of information they could twist, post, or spin into the next viral headline. A group of teenage fans kept refreshing their feeds, shouting updates they hadn't confirmed, while an older man kept repeating that this was all a political move, that nobody resurrects a name like Vaughn's unless they're trying to either break someone down or boost something bigger. The emotional charge in the air was unreal. People weren't just reacting, they were vibrating, feeding off each other's fear, excitement, and confusion. Back inside, Durk moved toward a quieter corner of the hallway, while two officers subtly shadowed his steps, making sure the growing crowd didn't swallow him up. A woman approached him, her face anxious, her voice trembling as she said, "Is it true? Did they really, Vaughn?" Durk didn't respond immediately. He just lowered his head for a moment as if searching for the right words. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady, but heavy. People don't say anything until we hear what's real. It wasn't a denial. It wasn't confirmation. It was something in between. Something that left everyone who overheard even more unsettled. Meanwhile, deeper in the building, the judge sat in a private chamber with a pair of headphones, flanked by two senior clerks and a technical specialist who was assigned to verify the authenticity of the recording. Their faces judges were stone cold. The clerk pressed play, and nobody knows exactly what was said in those moments, but witnesses swear they heard the judge mutter something under her breath. Use something like, "This changes everything," before ordering the chamber doors closed completely. That single overheard line spread like wildfire through the courthouse, mutating with every retelling. By the time it reached the lobby, people were saying the judge gasped. By the time it hit the street, they were saying she turned pale. And online, minutes later, folks claimed she had slammed her desk and demanded security. None of it was confirmed, but the drama didn't need confirmation to grow. Around that same time, two individuals slipped quietly into the courthouse through a side door. They weren't dressed like reporters, weren't wearing badges, and definitely weren't trying to be noticed. They moved with purpose, heading straight toward the back office where legal assistants were stationed. A young intern noticed them and nervously asked who they were there to see. One of the men simply flashed an envelope and said, "We're here for the judge's office." His tone carried a seriousness that shut down all questions. The intern stepped aside. Nobody knows what was in that envelope. Another story seed planted into the frenzy. While all this was unfolding, Durk's closest circle started to arrive. A couple of his childhood friends came through looking stressed, pacing back and forth while arguing in whispers. One of them, clearly overwhelmed, kept repeating, "This don't make sense. Why now? Who digging this stuff up?" Another slammed his fist lightly against the wall and said, "They tryna break him. They tryna break everything y'all built." Their frustration echoed off the hallway walls, mixing with the muffled voices of spectators and journalists trying to catch angles on the drama. Then came the moment that really set off the powder keg. A courthouse staff member accidentally stepped out of the judge's chamber at the exact wrong time. She looked startled, flustered, and clearly under pressure. A reporter immediately rushed over, microphone in hand, asking if the judge had made any preliminary comments. The staffer panicked, stuttering out, She said the recording has implications." And just like that, the crowd lost its mind. Implications became the new trending word. A single vague statement turned into hundreds of theories. Durk's phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from family, friends, artists, random numbers, bloggers. Everybody wanted to know what was happening. A cousin FaceTimed him, shouting over and over, "They trying to drag you, man. This some whole setup. They trying to flip everything on you." Another voice in the background yelled, "Don't trust nobody." Durk hung up before saying a word. A journalist cornered his attorney in the hallway, asking whether the defense was aware of the audio beforehand. The lawyer, visibly irritated, snapped, "We were given no prior notice of these materials. This is irregular at best." Then he stormed off, leaving the journalist grinning because she had just secured a soundbite worthy of a trending headline. But the wildest twist of the hour came when a young woman, someone who looked like she hadn't slept in days, suddenly broke down crying near the water fountain. "They can't do this," she sobbed. "He don't deserve this. Vaughn wouldn't want his name used like this." People crowded around her, some comforting, others recording. Her meltdown became instant fodder for online clips labeled "Anonymous Insider Breaks Silence." She wasn't an insider, she was just emotional, overwhelmed by seeing two names she cared about dragged into chaos again. As the recess dragged on, fear mixed with curiosity. Some believed the audio was fake, some believed it would clear Durk, others were convinced it would raise more questions than answers. Supporters outside the courthouse began chanting. Newsroom anchors started repositioning their cameras, and inside, security tightened as if preparing for an eruption. Durk leaned against the wall, looking down the empty hallway that led toward the judge's chamber. His thoughts were unreadable, but one thing was clear from the way he stood there, unmoving, breathing slow, eyes sharp. Whatever came next, he was ready for it, even if nobody else was. As the recess stretched longer than anyone expected, the energy inside the courthouse turned from confusion into a slow-building panic that felt almost cinematic. People kept glancing toward the judge's chamber like they expected the door to burst open at any second, revealing either salvation or disaster. The hallway lights flickered slightly, maybe from old wiring, maybe just because tension had a way of making everything feel dramatic, and the small buzz of conversations rose into a chaotic hum. Durk's attorney paced in tight circles, phone pressed to his ear, whispering urgently as he tried to dissect every angle of what the prosecution was attempting. Meanwhile, Durk himself stood perfectly still, hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed but posture alert, like a man who had learned long ago that stillness can speak louder than emotion. Then someone from the prosecution's side walked by. by, an assistant DA known for her sharp expressions and even sharper tongue. She glanced at Durk, not with hostility, but with something far stranger, almost like pity. That tiny moment was enough to ignite a wildfire of speculation among those watching closely. People whispered, "Why'd she look at him like that? Does she know something we don't? What's on that recording?" Theories multiplied by the second, weaving themselves into dramatic threads that would soon flood social media. Outside, a fresh wave of supporters pushed against the barricades, demanding clarity. Some held up handwritten signs calling for justice. Others recorded themselves in emotional rants, saying they wouldn't leave until the truth was exposed. One viral live streamer pointed at the courthouse and declared loudly, "They're trying to rewrite history right now. They're trying to twist the legacy of two brothers." The stream exploded instantly, thousands of viewers piling in with comments, some defending Durk fiercely, others insisting they just wanted transparency, and a few stirring up even wilder conspiracies. Inside, however, a very different storm brewed. A prosecutor slammed a folder onto a nearby table so hard that the echo snapped through the hallway. He began arguing with a colleague, his voice low but heated, saying something about timing and protocol, and this wasn't supposed to drop today. That alone sent chills through the bystanders. If the prosecution wasn't united, if they were scrambling behind the scenes, what did that say about the recording's origins? Durk finally broke his silence and turned to his attorney. "Whatever they think they got," he said calmly, "they better be ready to stand on it." His lawyer nodded. "We'll challenge every inch of it," he replied, but the way his voice cracked slightly suggested even he didn't feel as confident as he wanted to. In another corner of the building, two older women, clearly longtime supporters, sat on a bench praying together. One held a small laminated photo of Vaughn, whispering that she didn't like hearing his name dragged back into chaos. "Let him rest," she murmured. The other woman squeezed her hand and said, "Sometimes the past don't stay buried when people want to use it." Their quiet conversation contrasted the loud commotion everywhere else, grounding the moment with a reminder of how deeply personal these names were to so many people. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from down the hallway. Everyone jumped, hearts racing, but it turned out to be a reporter dropping his camera bag in his rush to chase down a rumor someone claimed to overhear. The rumor that the judge had replayed the audio multiple times, that she had requested a transcript, that she had asked for clarification on certain voices. The rumor was probably exaggerated, as most rumors in tense situations are, but once it spread, there was no containing it. Bloggers began frantically recording voice notes for their channels, trying to get ahead of the story. Every new whisper, every suspicious glance, every closed door became a clue to be analyzed and dissected. The courthouse speakers crackled and everyone froze, thinking the judge was calling them back in, but it was only an unrelated announcement. Still, you could physically feel the disappointment drop over the crowd like a heavy curtain. Honest people weren't just waiting, they were mentally preparing for impact. Durk walked over to a window overlooking the crowded street below, the fans chanting his name, the ones crying, the ones holding up phones. They weren't just looking for drama, they were looking for reassurance. Something solid to hold on to in a moment that felt like quicksand. He exhaled slowly, fogging the glass for a second, and whispered under his breath, "Vaughn." It wasn't loud, it wasn't meant for anyone else. But one person standing close enough caught it, and that tiny whisper added another emotional layer to an already overwhelming situation. A few minutes later, Durk's lawyer returned with a new piece of troubling news. Someone from the prosecution had apparently contacted an outside analyst, someone with expertise in digital audio reconstruction. That meant they weren't just reviewing the file, they were preparing for a technical battle. The attorney clenched his jaw. They're gearing up for something big," he muttered, "but we're not walking in blind. I've already called our specialist." Still, his hands shook slightly as he organized his notes. Then came perhaps the strangest development of the hour. A man in a gray suit approached Durk very subtly, handing him a folded piece of paper without saying a single word. Security immediately stepped in, but the man simply walked away, blending into the crowd before anyone could question him. Durk unfolded the paper, his eyes narrowed. Whatever was written on it, it wasn't long, but it hit him hard enough that his expression changed for the first time all day. His lawyer leaned in. "What is it?" Durk didn't answer immediately. He just crumpled the paper in his fist and said, "We need to be ready for everything." No one knew what that note said, but a nearby journalist claimed she saw the words, "not what it seems," scribbled on the page. Whether she truly did or was just stirring the pot didn't matter. The rumor spread instantly, adding yet another layer of mystery. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a bailiff stepped out of the judge's chamber with a stiff posture and announced, "Everyone please prepare to re-enter the courtroom shortly." His tone was flat, but his eyes betrayed something heavy, something uneasy, something that suggested whatever the judge had heard was far from simple. Oh, people rushed to gather their belongings, the buzz rising again like a wave preparing to break. Durk straightened his jacket, rolled his shoulders back, and took one slow breath. The hallway lights hummed, the crowd parted around him, the atmosphere thickened with anticipation. The storm was about to continue, and nobody knew which direction the lightning would strike next. When everyone finally began filing back into the courtroom, the energy felt completely different from before. Earlier, so the room had been tense. Now it felt electrically charged, like the air itself might snap and spark if anyone breathed too deeply. People moved slowly, cautiously, as though they were stepping into a space where truth and rumor were getting ready to collide in ways nobody was prepared for. Even the sound of footsteps seemed amplified. The shuffle of papers, the creak of wooden benches, everything was louder, sharper, more dramatic. Oh, it was as if the building itself knew something heavy was about to unfold. Durk entered last, with his attorney at his side. The whispers began the second he crossed the threshold. Not disrespectful whispers, worried ones, curious ones, whispered prayers, whispered theories, whispered fear, disguised as speculation. Durk looked straight ahead, face unreadable, carrying himself like a man who had already rehearsed every worst-case scenario but still refused to fold under the weight of possibility. When the judge walked in, the entire room snapped into silence. So sudden it felt unnatural. Her expression was controlled, but anyone paying attention could see the exhaustion behind her eyes. She had listened to something significant, something unexpected, and it left its mark on her demeanor. She cleared her throat and began speaking in a tone that carried both caution and authority. She announced that the audio in question was complex, containing multiple voices, ambiguous exchanges, and contextual gaps. The crowd leaned forward, hanging on every syllable. She explained that before she could determine its relevance, portions of the recording would need further verification by neutral experts. But then she added a line nobody expected. However, the initial review indicates the presence of statements that may require clarification from the defense. That one sentence hit the room like a slap. Durk's lawyer immediately stood, demanding to know what clarification meant, but the judge lifted her hand, signaling for patience, and continued. She explained that she would allow a short segment of the audio to be played privately between the attorneys, just long enough for both sides to confirm what they were dealing with. Not long enough for full interpretation, but enough to prevent blind chaos. The prosecution looked entirely too satisfied. The defense looked rattled, and the spectators looked like their souls were about to leave their bodies. Moments later, both legal teams were escorted to a side room. The door closed behind them, leaving the courtroom suspended in a vacuum of anticipation. Without the attorneys present, everyone else felt unmoored. Some sat rigidly, others shifted nervously. A few clutched their phones, waiting to tweet the instant anything happened. Durk sat alone, hands clasped loosely, gaze fixed on the table in front of him. Not shaking, not tense, just deep in thought. What nobody knew was that inside the private chamber, the tension was far more explosive. The audio technician loaded the file, connecting the small speaker to the judge's secure device. As soon as the voices crackled through, the atmosphere in the room changed. The sound was grainy but unmistakable. Two overlapping voices, talking fast, emotional, stressed. One voice was clearly mid-argument, saying something like, "They watching everything, don't move sloppy." Another voice responded sharply with, "We gon' handle it, ain't nobody catching us off guard." The words weren't names, they weren't explicit incriminations, but the tone carried intensity, familiarity, heat, and the prosecution was banking on that tone being interpreted in a certain way. Durk's lawyer fought back instantly. This could be anyone. This isn't a clear identification. The timing is unclear. The context is missing. You can't build an entire narrative off fragments. The prosecutor raised his eyebrow. We don't need narrative, we need clarity, and clarity may require confronting past conversations that could reshape current understanding. The defense attorney slammed his folder shut. There is no universe where hearsay from an unverified recording gets weaponized without a fight. The judge stepped in before the argument escalated. She told them the full audio would undergo technical analysis, but she needed a brief summary to return to the courtroom with something that wouldn't violate confidentiality personality, but would allow the session to proceed with transparency. Outside, the crowd was unraveling. Reporters kept asking Durk questions he couldn't answer yet, and fans watched him like they were trying to read his heartbeat from across the room. A young woman in the back began crying softly, saying she couldn't take another twist and praying that the audio wasn't what the internet was already making it out to be. A man beside her said loudly, "They always try to twist conversations into something they're not. This whole thing feels orchestrated." Others weren't so sure. One spectator whispered, "What if the audio really is old? What if it's from a moment nobody knew about?" The reply came instantly. "Even if it is, that don't mean it proves anything. People talk when they stressed. That don't make them criminals." Back in the private chamber, Durk's lawyer pressed his palms against the table. "We need timestamps. We need origin data. We need background noise analysis. None of this is admissible until we dissect it from every angle." The prosecutor smirked slightly. "Oh, we intend to dissect it. Yeah, thoroughly." The judge ordered both sides back into the courtroom. When the door opened, the energy shifted again, this time darker, heavier, more uncertain. Everyone stood as she returned to the bench. She delivered her statement clearly. The initial review of the submitted audio contains dialogue that may warrant further inquiry. However, no conclusions will be drawn until expert analysts authenticate the recording. In the meantime, both parties will receive transcriptions with redacted segments to ensure fairness. The room erupted, people gasping, whispering, erupting into frantic speculation. Durk closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in deeply, not defeated, not panicked, just processing. Outside the courtroom, chaos exploded again. Fans shouted at each other, debating interpretations. One man yelled, "They're trying to break the last piece of legacy left between them." Another replied, "No. This is someone trying to rewrite a whole story we don't even know the half of." Social media lit up instantly. Hashtags multiplied. Clips from inside the courthouse spread within seconds. Durk sitting still. The judge speaking sternly. Attorneys arguing softly in the background. People analyzed every frame like it was a documentary. Baggy-eyed bloggers recorded desperate takes from the courthouse steps. Swearing the vibe inside felt haunted, like the past itself had walked into the courtroom wearing new boots. Durk walked through the hallway calmly, surrounded by security. Fans reached out to him emotionally, some crying, others begging him to stay strong. He nodded at them subtly, not smiling, but acknowledging the support with quiet strength. And then, as he reached the door leading outside, someone in the crowd shouted something that made everyone freeze. "The audio isn't the real problem. The real problem is who sent it." That line hit like dynamite, because deep down, everyone had been thinking the same thing. Who was behind this? And what were they trying to accomplish? And that brings us to the moment where everything hangs in the balance. After all the whispers, the confusion, the courtroom shockwaves, and the unanswered questions, we're left staring at a situation that feels bigger than any headline, bigger than any rumor, bigger than any clip bouncing around online. The mystery behind that recording, the shadowy figure who sent it, the strange looks exchanged in the courthouse. It all leaves a trail of questions nobody has answers to yet. Fans are divided, supporters are emotional, and the entire world is waiting to see what twist comes next, because this story feels far from over. Whether the truth clears the air or deepens the drama, one thing is certain. Whatever unfolds next will change the conversation in ways nobody saw coming. Now, if you have been locked in, if you've been feeling every beat of this wild storyline, then this is your moment to jump in. I want to hear from you. What do you think is really going on behind the scenes? Do you think the recording will actually reveal anything meaningful? Or is someone playing a strategic game to shake things up? And that note, the one slipped to him in silence. What do you think it said? Drop your theories in the comments, because the debates on this one are about to go crazy. Make sure you like this video, smash that subscribe button, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss the next update. Because when the next twist hits, you're gonna wanna be right here with us, watching everything unfold in real time. This is only the beginning. And trust me, the next chapter is going to be even wilder. Stay tuned.